Oh, yes, I do.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah,
Apologies for the interruption.
Okay.
yeah. Sorry about that.
Okay, so anything that we said confidentially before now won't matter because was recorded.
I'm so sorry. I'm
Okay.
so sorry about
All right.
that.
Okay.
Oh,
We can move to the next slide unless there's a question there.
okay, I'm sorry, Michael. Any questions? Lakeisha, thank you for joining us.
And actually, I see in the chat that Lakeisha may help us kind of get through this. So Lakeisha, you just jump right in when you get ready. Okay. This slide, and once again, there was a debate about if entrepreneurship belonged in workforce development or it belonged in economic development. So what we did, we both decided just to have a slide, and if people want to talk about either one in either one of the groups, we can do that. But we know that one of the ways to become income sufficient is to be an entrepreneur. And I think many times people don't really look at that. They more look at the whole idea of getting a job. Interestingly, in this city, when we've had the pleasure of having these legacy companies, like RJ Reynolds and Haynes and Piedmont Airlines and others, it was always easy to get a job. And in some way, I think it kind of kept the entrepreneurship pace down. But as you all know, that is not the case these days. And what we're finding is that more and more entrepreneurship is seen as an avenue for income sufficiency. So we want to make sure we at least address that. And at this point, don't know if there are any other perspectives on that. I know, once again, the title of our group is Workforce Development, but we think that there are other ways that we can address this issue as well.
I would agree with that.
I agree.
Sure.
Yeah, and we certainly welcome any of your comments. The only thing that I would comment and piggyback on what Michael said is that especially with respect to our youth and our young people, not everyone is interested in going to a four-year college. So they are, it may be worthwhile to look into entrepreneurship, maybe something if they have a passion for work, for a career outside of corporate America. So I think entrepreneurship plays a significant part in people being satisfied with the type of work that they do. So any other comments on that? On entrepreneurship before we move on?
I was just going to say that I agree. I think that it belongs in this space. And I also hope that there'll be equal attention given to both directions towards entrepreneurship as well as career pathways, because I feel like there is quite a bit of conversation going on around entrepreneurship. And I don't feel like there is as much conversation happening in the community around having more inclusive pathways to careers that really pay a strong wage.
Yeah, I think that's a excellent point, Sandra, because what we find is that, particularly among Black businesses, they tend to be in a couple of different categories, particularly in the service industry, which tend to not pay that much versus technology and some other things that are becoming very popular these days. But the whole career path, I think, is something that we really need to focus on more, particularly, in view of some of the announcements we've had lately about some of the companies that are coming to the area, providing jobs because they need suppliers, they need contractors to work for them. And we need to be in a position that when I think there's a company called Boom that's coming to Greensboro. There's, and you all know them as well. I think there's a car company that's coming. There's a electric battery car that's coming. I just read that There's a steel company, Nucor, is adding some jobs either in Lexington or Salisbury. So when we think about the entrepreneurship and workforce development, I think we got to look obviously beyond just Winston-Salem. I think we got to look at the triad in general. I mean, everything's about, half hour ride away, which is in most places, that's not a bad ride, so to speak. So that's that. So entrepreneurship will definitely be on the menu, put it that way.
Okay.
Okay.
So,
Gloria?
go ahead, Michael. Sorry. No, go ahead.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay, so reflecting on the data for our equity work group, there's a couple questions. Is the data relevant? Is there additional data that you have access to that will assist us in defining the problem? Thinking about the data and your experience in this area, what are the problems? And, the good thing is that the folks that are on this call, each of you have information and data that you're familiar with and work with, I'm sure. So if there's a way that you can share some of that information, we'll be more than open to it. Because we know that, once again, that the data that we just presented just kind of scratched the surface, and it makes you ask 2 or 3 other questions after, reading that data. So.
And we, the more detailed question that we're asking here is, as you take a look at the data that was presented in this work group, is there anything else in your area of expertise or your area, your profession, that you think might be relevant when we talk about equity, diversity, inclusion, and some of the root causes of why there is such disparity within the ethnic groups?
Can I ask a question? I know we went through some of the data. I'm interested in I don't have access to this data, but I'm interested in also seeing by sector how Blacks are overrepresented. So we know that in the hospitality arena and in certain other, and I'm thinking of like more lower wage positions that we dominate. And I'm just wondering if there's also data that kind of shows where individuals tend to be employed.
Sandra, that's a great question. That's one of the questions, actually, Michael, that we entertained earlier. Tell me what you all think about this. What we have, Michael has provided a list of, what is it, Michael, the top 50?
Top 50 companies, right.
Or top 50 employers in Winston-Salem. What we thought that we would do as a group is dissect that list and take a organization, HR policies, look at their at their hiring methods, look at the positions that these people have. It may be within Wake Forest Baptist, if I remember back in 2017, I think it was about maybe 48% of the people hired there were Black people, or let's say minority people. But within that organization and within those positions, most of those were service oriented and lower income positions. So to help answer your question, the best way that I thought might be able to help look at that is to look at these organizations and see what do the people do, what kind of work jobs do they have. Is that kind of what you're looking at, whether it's a service, whether they're mostly service or products, or just to kind of see where they fit in the employment realm?
Yeah, I'm just curious about where the majority of individuals are employed, and I know that health is a very large sector, an employer
Mhm.
here. But what I've found is that a lot of individuals will go in and then they will start off in like a certified nursing assistant. But then in terms of their advancement, there
Mhm.
are often like a number of challenges. And I have seen some, I know of some examples, and I've funded some examples of employers trying to actively help and want to help individuals in those positions rise up to, let's say, registered nurses. And so I think that there's like some interest, but it would be interesting to me to sort of first see where all of these kind of pockets of individuals tend to be employed, so that we can see like what interest does the employer have or the industry have, and you know, like trying to support the workforce's advancement, you know.
I
Any
think
other
that,
comments?
yes, this is Lakeisha. Hi, everyone. To Sandra's point, and Sandra, thank you so much for bringing that point out. As she was speaking, it took me back to education. So I know that we talked about how everything has this intersection. And so with education, you know, I'm thinking that these employers who do want to see growth and advancement, there's this challenge of education. And the challenge of education leads to all of these other challenges. So we then begin to talk about childcare. I don't have time to go to school. I don't have time to do this. You know, all of these other things that kind of build on that. And so I think that this activity that we're going to do today is actually going to lead us into those whys so that we can get to hopefully the root cause of this. And we probably will
Right.
find that intersectionality is everywhere in all 8 disparages. So I'm really excited about where we're getting ready to go with this for Michael and Gloria. So as we begin to look at the whys and find that root, we're going to see that hopefully we can reach those employers, and hopefully we can figure out what that cause is and create some change.
Good.
So as we take a look at the issues here, what we want to identify is what is a problem statement. We use this to understand why it's important to make a problem statement in the beginning of the creative problem solving process. So with the problem statement, what we're hoping to do is we want to ask the 5 whys, the 5 W's: who, where, what, why, and when. So a problem statement is a 1 sentence that sums up what you want to change. Okay, it helps you find more useful solutions by providing a clear and understanding view of what the problem is. Okay, so a problem statement is a guiding star for your creative thinking. Okay, does anyone have any questions on what we're looking for when we ask for a problem statement? Because we're, and based on the data that we have in front of us, we need to come up with a problem that we have identified. So to problem statement, it's a problem using one define, and I realize that within our work group, there's going to be more than one problems, but if we can narrow down to define the problem, and we want to use evidence to describe and explain the context of the problem, we want to look at the relevance. In this section, we want to describe why the problem matters. So the first take on defining the problem for our equity work group. And at this point, we are open to any suggestions of why you think the problem is, and we'll move on into the root cause. So when we look at our problem, when we look at our data, based on what you saw in the data, what would you say is the problem? And if you like, I'm more than welcome. I'm more than happy to go back so that you can take a look. And even if you think that that particular data is not relevant to the significant disparity that we're working with, please free. Now's the time for you to say, you know, I think this is more relevant and I'm willing to do this research into it. time to do that. We have, you know, as we go back to this particular slide, is that data relevant? Because that data, we do have the source of all the data that we have. So is data that we have. Why do you think the median household income for Blacks is so much less? Or tell me where you would like to start with the whys. We can start here. We can look at the employment rate. We can look at the income insufficiencies. We need to know what your why is. Why do you think? What do you think is the problem?
Well,
And then from ascertaining what the problem is. Okay, go ahead, Michael.
I'll kind of give it a start to try, and it kind of goes back to something that Sandra said earlier. I think one reason is career choice that many times, and it goes back to something Lakeisha said also, education. If many times the education or lack of determines what your career is, whether you planned it that way or not, okay? And the reality of it is that we talked about, we think there's probably a cluster of particularly African-Americans in the service industry, which is why when we went through a pandemic, I think there was even a greater suffering by that group because it wasn't the situation where now you can just get on a Zoom call and continue to do your work. More times than not, there were jobs that you had to physically show up. And unfortunately, the physically show up jobs are the ones that are the lower paying jobs. So I don't know if that's a root cause, but that's one of the causes, put it that way, career choice.
Career choice.
I'd like to
Any
add
other
to that.
thoughts?
I'd like to add to that career choice is lack of resources. And I would try to focus on lack of technology. So in as much as many of us were on the Zoom call, those who were in the service industry didn't have an option if they didn't have technology, if they didn't have internet, if they didn't have a device, they didn't have the opportunity to get on that Zoom call or try to do that work from home job because they did not have the resources. And so one of the things that we notice here in Forsyth County is we have a workforce development board. And so that workforce development board is the same board that goes out and speaks to these organizations and corporations that are coming into Winston-Salem to say, hey, what do you need in a workforce? And so my question would be, who are they advocating for? So we know that our workforce development board, they have this conversation with these big industries. And then the big industry then says, okay, I need this number of laborers or this number of nurses or this number of whatever. And then from that, Forsyth Tech or Goodwill or whomever, who also sits on the workforce development board for our county, they come in and say, okay, we can develop a course for laborers, very specific to what your need is. And then we'll feed those folks to you. And so in as much as I see that happening, I've seen it happen for the last 15 years that I've been here, who are the ones who are actually landing those positions? When we talk about in the last 2 to 5 years, advanced manufacturing has been this big thing, right? And so our county, our city, that we poured a boatload of tax breaks and money into advanced manufacturing. Forsyth Tech created a lab to walk you through the process, right? Well, my husband happens to be in advanced manufacturing. And so when we go and we look at those who took advantage of the apprenticeships, none are Black. There's not one Black person in his entire company that took advantage of the advanced manufacturing apprenticeship offered through workforce development, WIOA. My question would be, why?
Lakeisha, I was going to stop you right there and ask you why. That's a perfect why. I want to think they don't take it.
Well, and to kind of add, Lakeisha, you were saying that they didn't take advantage of it. did they know about it?
That
question.
leads us to our why statements. Maybe they did know about it. I
Right.
don't know. Only because I have inside knowledge. I do know that this opportunity was presented to any and everyone who took a part of the workforce development program through, let's say, Goodwill. Yes, it was offered. I think that our community needs to do a lot more marketing. I think that us as nonprofits, if there are nonprofits on here, we as nonprofits need to be able to come together and gather information and support one another. I think that our silos are one of the reasons why opportunities are missed by people of color. So I will not remove myself from any blame, but I think that our silos play a huge role. And why is that? So why do our silos play a role? Because the pot seems to be so small and we're all trying to reach for it. Everybody wants their own workforce development program. Everybody wants their own seat at the table with the Workforce Development Board. Instead of working together in a collaborative manner, that's what we do. Why does everybody want their own seat at the table? That's the next why, right? Can someone else jump in? Why do you think all nonprofits want their own seat at the table?
I wanted to go back a bit when you were talking about the apprenticeship, and from the research that I've done, you know, nationally, Black people are underrepresented across the board in all apprenticeship programs. So you see them predominantly populated by, you know, white males. And also, I think that racism also plays a role in this. When people have been denied access to a sector for many, many, many decades, I think it also, there's like a disadvantage in trying to walk through the door and being maybe like the first or the second or the third Black individual to be hired into a position of that like level. And I'm not exactly sure. I know like they advertise to everybody. I get that, but I also wonder about like some of the other hidden barriers that exist, because there could be challenges with transportation or certain training things that they had expectations of people to do in those roles. And maybe this person is also a caretaker to their elderly parent and can't do those things. I don't know exactly, but I do know that our community is often like overburdened with not only caring for themselves, but caring for many other people. And I just wonder like what maybe needs to shift or change. I think about like the trucking industry and how they wanted to attract more women. So they started to change things. They made it available for women to get home at night to tuck in their kids. And they made it available for them to stay in, you know, hotels instead of sleeping in the back of the truck. Sometimes I wonder what needs to change for these programs and how they're being offered so that it's more welcoming and works for people and their schedules. That's just a thought that I have in terms of why people are not always taking advantage of it.
I think that trucking piece is an excellent example, because we see now more than ever women and more African-American males really getting into trucking. And there was one barrier that was removed from the trucking industry, or at least lessened, and it was that criminal background piece. So there was an opportunity for individuals who transitioned out of institutions to be able to take a truck driving class. It's, you know, maybe 12 weeks. You take the class, you easily earn $60,000, and that is the low end. And so what we've seen, once women got a hold of that knowledge, we are out there driving trucks. You know, maybe I need to go drive a truck. But it's just really one of the things is that criminal background that, and this can take us to the criminal justice group. Why are we criminalized at an alarming rate? I mean, so everything, again, intersection. I'm gonna shut up, okay?
I think those are great points. Those are really points. And one of the things that Sandra said that kind of sparked an idea in my mind, and I think, Michael, we kind of talked about it earlier. When we talk about a shift in programs and a shift in practices within organizations, one of the things that I think would help would be and things that we could do would be if we could somehow, once we identify these organizations, find out what their diversity and inclusion practices are, find out what it takes to meet the requirements of their skill sets. And once these people meet these requirements, find out why they're not given an equitable opportunity to apply for that position. And I think it's within North Carolina law that any public organization will have some type of diversity and inclusion program. You probably need to tell us why someone is equally qualified who applied for that job did not get it, because they need to be held accountable.
Mhm. Okay, let's get back to the whys. Are we still coming up with the whys, or we already figured out all the whys?
Well, we're looking, okay, so, all right, so what I did is I just jotted down some of the reasons, some of the questions that we had. So when you look at the whys, and if you want to take a look at some of those things that we came up with, misspelled apprenticeships, that we came up with, do you see anything there? So where is a problem that you can identify here? So if we say lower paying jobs, give me a why within this information that we discussed that we can ask about.
Well, I guess one why is it could be lower
Oops, sorry.
lower
Sorry about that.
education. It could be
Okay,
lower education, or it could be lack of preparedness.
okay, let's go back. So if we say the reason is lower education, why is it lower education? Why do they have lower education? If we want to use that as a why, if we
Well,
say
I mean,
lower education,
I don't want to throw the school system under the bus, but we know that literally on the bus, that when you look at things like, third grade reading levels, I mean, by that point, we're already behind in some
Sorry.
ways. So there's some culpability there, I'll put it that way.
is that among Blacks?
Yes.
Okay, why do they have third grade reading levels?
I don't know. That's probably for the education group to figure out, but I don't know. Yeah.
So is that because they don't possess the necessary skill sets? Because at this,
Oh, I'm sorry.
what do you think? What do you all think?
I was just going to say, I think that if you also have students who are, yes, they're all third graders, but if you have children that are coming from households that, are income insufficient, so then there's problems with having enough food, having those daily stresses, that all impacts a child's ability to retain information when they have a lot of other stresses that are due to, poverty.
So I just want to make sure that we're clear that I think that may be covered in the education piece.
Mm-hmm.
Where that is these people, whether they're young, old, older, whatever, why they have third grade educations, or why, I mean, that was the question that Mike posed. How can we get them from a third grade education to bring their skill sets up so that they can be employable? Is that what we're asking? Is that the why that we want to tackle?
Once again, I think that's more, it's it's actually a factor. I'm not sure if it's the whole why as far as workforce development. I mean,
Okay,
it's obviously a factor, but I don't know if we consider that a
okay,
why.
okay.
One thing that I would say is a why is I think many times we don't have the role model, so to speak. Okay, and what I'll say particularly, I deal a lot with particularly young African American males, and many times they are not aware of some of the career choices that are out there that, as they say, pay good money. You know, we tend to get, you know, oversaturated with you know, the role models in the entertainment and sports arena, but you don't hear about, you know, the plumber that makes $100,000,
Mhm.
you know, or
Mhm.
the guy that you know, does electrical or HVAC. You don't have those guys as the role models. So many times, you know,
Okay.
they're just unaware of some of these career choices that pay great salaries.
So why do we not have role models? Is that because there's a shortage of, I mean, why do we not have role models to enforce values in good career choices?
I
If we're
think
going
part
to use
of
that as
that
a why.
is, and I personally believe part of that is generational poverty. They've not seen anyone achieve, go beyond, you know, explore these things, and no one has shown them the options and opportunities.
Sure. Yeah, I agree with Carol on that, and I think something that also is that reflected in our segregated communities, where we basically, you know, concentrate poverty on one side of town. So, you know, your neighbors aren't necessarily doing well either. So you don't really have anything to aspire to, versus
Okay.
if you were in a neighborhood where there were a lot of people, you know, working and doing these great jobs, then that's your role model there, of seeing someone get up every morning and go to work and feed their family well. But, you know, we're in a situation where more times than not, you know, all the poor people are kind of warehoused on one side of town, and their reality is their next door neighbor. So
I think role
So,
models are helpful. I was going to say, I think role models are helpful, but I don't think that regardless of whether you go to a lower wealth school or a higher wealth school, that we do a great job in the school system of just career exposure as a whole. I just don't think that's a strength. I don't think we do that. I think other countries do that, have a
mhm.
much stronger, clearer pathway. So I think it's just across the board also. I don't really see that happening anywhere.
So why then? Okay, let's try to create a why from the last statement that that Carol and Michael made. So given that there's generational poverty, and given that there's very little success in the family and very few options and opportunities in segregated communities, all of that combined in one, why do they not have opportunities to get them to rise above this? If we want to use this as a why, meaning, because what I'm trying to do is lead up to solutions, not lead up to generational problems, but to lead up to solutions as to why they don't have these opportunities. Because we need to try to get them out of that area, out of that space. So, you know, I maybe could we say something like, we need to help them identify skill sets, identify job opportunities.
okay, I didn't think we were getting to solutions yet. I thought we were
Right.
still working on the
Right,
why.
I'm saying, but why, I'm saying, why do they not have these opportunities? What reason, why do they not have these opportunities?
I think a lot of it is lack of information. I think not all
Right.
the information funnels down to who needs it the most. So
Right.
they don't have the information on the trade skills that they could have a whole career in a business with. You know, they don't have the
Right.
electrical skills, the plumbing skills, woodworking, welding. You know, we've got a bunch of factories coming in and nobody to work on machinery if it breaks down.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Darlinda, I think that's an awesome point, because what that does, what you just gave us, is exactly what we need that will lead us up to a solution, but it's also helping us identify the root causes. So yeah, I mean, I think that's perfect. So 1, 2, 3, we have 2 more. So why do you think there's a lack of information? Why do you think that information is not funneled through to blacks? Why? Why do you think it's a lack?
I don't think we know how to communicate with the community properly. What is the best way to communicate? Is it TV, radio, print, flyers, door to door? I don't know. But I think we have to figure out, kind of like marketing, any business has to do, learn who your
Right.
customer is and how do you reach them. So we
Okay, so maybe we don't
market
communicate.
research.
Okay, before we get to the solution, we're saying the why is so we're
We
saying
don't know how to
it's
reach them.
okay, don't know how to communicate with the target community. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So with that being said, on the last why do we not know how to communicate? Because that's going to tell us what we're going to have to do in order to be able to communicate. Is it lack of interest or what?
I think that we
Why
put
do we
a
not?
lot of energy into programs in serving rather than marketing and recruiting. So when I think about, and I go back to nonprofit budgets, that marketing line item is not tens of thousands of dollars. However,
Right.
that direct impact line item is. And so
Mm-hmm.
I think that that funding piece, and when you think about meeting people where they are, you have to go to the masses. So if the masses is on TikTok, then you have to go on TikTok. If the masses is on Twitter, you have to go
Right.
on Twitter. And then that poses another issue because many of us may not know how to utilize, you know, these different social media and social networking platforms. So
Well, Darlinda, that's your area of expertise.
Yes, it
If we
is.
have to meet them, if we have to meet them on a social media platform to get them to understand the value of skill sets and the value of good jobs, we can always defer to you with that. Okay. Okay, so we have just identified why we think there's lower education, and lower education could also, I think, encompass lower skill sets too. What do y'all think? Because if you got lower education, your skill sets are probably lower. I mean,
People
but
don't know
so
what their skill
where we,
sets are.
right, okay. Mm-hmm.
I also think that sometimes skill sets remain lower also. There are certain professions that if you want to go back to school and do this, it is very easy to get that certification. You can go online. You can take this through online. Then there are other positions where you have to do advancement. You have to be in person. You have to be in the classroom. And what are barriers to that? Well, if I have 2 small children and I've already worked all day long, how am I getting to this course? I think that sometimes we make certain courses much easier for people to get and obtain when the salary is lower. I feel like there's far more flexibility. That's part assumption and part what I've seen in some areas.
You're very true. That I think you're spot on. I'll never forget, and I don't go back. It's much easier for America to place a Band-Aid over poverty by offering Medicaid and subsidized housing than it is for them to create jobs and skill sets that people can grow and excel. Does that make sense? It's easier to keep, people unemployed by giving them Medicaid and food stamps than it is to create, a means by which they can grow. They can do better, want to do better.
I don't think that's
I think that there's a
I don't
lot
think
of,
it's intentional.
yeah, I don't know if it's intentional, but like
Right.
one of the areas that I'm working on that this connects to is the public benefits cliff. And it is very challenging for people when you are receiving a child care subsidy and other things. Just getting a 25-cent raise could have you lose hundreds of dollars in child care
Absolutely.
subsidies. That's very problematic. Like, there's no way to just jump over that. As a single mom, I wouldn't be able to afford childcare and accept a raise of even $5 or $6. You know what I mean? Like, whatever the amount is. So there are a lot of challenges also in the system that keep people stuck.
You said challenges in what system?
In this system. And I'm thinking about like the public benefit system in particular.
Right. That keep them.
That keep them from advancing, because
Right.
the amount of money that you would have to make, you'd have to jump up at least by another $35,000, $40,000 before you would begin to just be even with where you were before, And so that's a real challenge. Like, something has to be done in order for people to get over that huge hurdle.
So, we have identified at least one problem, and we've expanded on that problem with the whys. What do you all think about including something relative to holding employers accountable? Because for some reason, the median incomes, sure, they're about the same, but how do we know within those employers that they are exercising diversity and inclusion so that that Black applicant is given the same equitable opportunity to advance as his counterpart or her counterpart? So do you all perceive that as being a problem to the jobs and workforce development disparity? Because we have not addressed that. We've addressed issues regarding the person, getting them ready. But how do you all think? Do you all perceive that as an inequitable acquisition, if you will? Or do you think employers are being equitable when they advance, either when they hire or when they advance Blacks? Or is that a problem? Do you all not see that as any issue? I guess is my question. Is it worthwhile that we can add as part of the problem before we move on?
I don't think we have enough data to know if it's truly a problem. We don't know the type of employment.
Okay. So is that something you think that we need to include in terms of the data? Because I totally agree with you, Darlinda, but I'm just trying to ascertain, when we're putting our problems together, does any of it include lack and with respect to Black employment. That's all I'm trying to determine.
I'm not sure for me if it's the primary
Okay.
impediment at this point in time.
Okay.
I think that there's some other challenges and barriers that even when you
Okay.
put an opportunity there, it is a lot harder for some people to take advantage of it.
What do you think we've covered? Do you think we need to include another problem other than this one that we've identified and expounded on? Because we're trying to get to the root causes.
Right, and I really appreciate you lifting up the fact that we've named a lot of things on the individual level. That's something that I have really tried to move away from in my work, because I think for a long time we've often looked to fix individuals, although there's really not something wrong with the individual. There's something wrong with the process, the pathways that we've created, and other things, you know, in our workforce development, our systems and other things. And so I really appreciate you lifting that up. I think employers creating, like, I think there has to be a stronger linkages and kind of conversations going on with, in terms of like what employers need, and then start like building that up in individuals like earlier on. Like, we wait until somebody graduates and is at a 4th grade reading level, then suddenly we want to help them attain a college degree. I mean, I know it's complicated. A lot of these issues are really complicated. So,
well, Sandra, when we created our abstract, one of the things that we significantly highlighted in the abstract is how we can partner with these employees and find out exactly what they need in terms of skills, of qualifications, in terms of criminal backgrounds. That was one of the big things that Michael and I outlined in our abstract. And not to deviate at all from that, I think that does play a big role, because I think that everybody who is in this room with us right now can attest to and being in some type of space where they were shown racial injustice.
absolutely.
I think that's everybody in this space here. So, and saying that, I'm saying it to say that I believe that they believe in their heart that they were doing their very best job, and they felt like maybe they should have gotten the promotion, or maybe they should have gotten the recognition, and they didn't, or they should have gotten the job. So that being said, you know, I think it's worthwhile for us to not discredit the fact that the employers could hold some of that responsibility.
Absolutely. And I really,
If we could look at their HR policies. Yeah.
Right. I definitely think that what you put up there just now, the strong link in terms of what employers are asking for and, you know, requirements of an employee, is that really what it takes in order for that person to be successful in that position? Because as soon as you start asking for like a lot of advanced degrees, we already know that immediately has implications immediately in terms of who you're looking for.
Oh yeah.
And so
absolutely.
And I'm not saying that I believe that these employers just have like the perfect inclusive practices, that, you know, there's a lot of challenges there. So I agree. I think looking at hiring practices and just doing.
So can we make quick? Can we make why?
I didn't hear the last thing you said, Gloria.
Is that something that we need to include? Is that, because I'm not opposed at all to having these two questions posed. I just don't think it's fair to assume that all of the all of the responsibility lies in that person who is sitting on the couch.
Absolutely.
We've covered them up there to try to get, I mean, just to be blunt with you, I think that some of the responsibilities lies in the discouragement of good Black people who want to work and don't feel like they're given a fair chance, even at their current jobs.
No, I
Because
agree
see,
100%. Yeah.
yeah. And what they're saying is that Black people are working. They're saying that 58 and 57% of the working force are Blacks and whites. So they're working. That's not the issue here in terms of employment. The issue is equity and being able to reach that median income that their counterpart is getting. You know what I'm saying? Getting them to the point, whether it's their skill set, which we've covered, but we also need to hold those employers accountable and say, you know, what kind of diversity and inclusion practices are you promoting within this organization?
And
those
I
are things
agree
that
with
we
that.
could do. Okay, go ahead, Carol.
Okay, and I agree with that. I also think it ties into what Lakeisha brought out earlier, and that is access, which is if I've got to apply online and I don't have the ability to do that, either the skills or the Wi-Fi or the technology to do that, how can I ever catch up? And that is not the employer, that is our system. And Michael, I'm sure you're going to jump in and comment on this as well as Lakeisha, that this is a group, there is a group here who is left behind, whether it's age or income, that I can't even get to that employer. So.
Yeah, no, I agree. I put all that under the category of barriers. Okay, lack of internet, lack of transportation, lack of childcare, lack of knowledge of the jobs. Yeah, that's a barrier that I think, you know, we obviously, you know, can address, or at least try to address in some way. And I think that, along with the issue that, you know, Gloria is bringing up, has contributed to the problem. But once again, I think, you know, 2022, we're in an era where we're probably as close as we've ever been to what they call full employment. Okay, you got employers now scrambling to get employees. Okay, even I've heard of some employers that they have kind of changed their drug policy to, we allow marijuana, but nothing else. You can smoke weed, but, you know, you can't, you know, do that hard stuff. That's how bad they need folks now. You know, I was riding down 40 and I saw an ad for, I think it's Tyson's Chicken. Okay, and they're advertising $21 an hour. I mean, which is, so that tells you, you know, how bad they're looking for folks. So I think in some way, you know, some of these issues that they've had in the past, as far as, and once again, we're talking about just getting into the company. I think what Gloria is speaking more to, once you get into the company, how you advance through the company. Okay, but as far as it is now, to me, anybody that wants a job, wants to work, it's out there for you. It may not be what you want to do, because maybe you don't have the skill set, the education, you haven't prepared yourself for what you think you want to do. But as far as just an opportunity to be employed, it's out there, unless you have one of those barriers that we talked about.
Yeah.
Okay, so as we look at the barriers, and we've kind of gotten away from the whys, is there anything else we need to add to that? Access to resources, the HR policies and practices. Is there anything else that we can look at in terms of the employer?
Gloria, when you say
Okay.
lack of flexibility in HR policies and practices, what do you mean by that?
What I mean is like where they don't ban the box, where they don't, where they don't accommodate people in terms of flex hours. Because just kind of their practices, how do they, their screening processes. What do they use in terms of, if they say you've got to have a college degree, do they say college plus work experience combined, that kind of thing? Why are these people not getting into these positions, I guess? And that probably doesn't address it. That's one area that I would be interested in, their practices, their hiring practices. And particularly because I'm an employment agency. So, even if they can't hire a former offender, would they allow an employment agency to come in and hire them? So is there anything else you'd like to add in terms of trying to look at a problem statement? And somebody, I don't know who said it, was access to resources. Anything you'd like to elaborate on that? I think it was Sandra.
I don't remember what I was talking about in terms of access to resources right now, but
we can come back to it. We can come back to it. And
yeah.
these are just thoughts. Okay.
I do feel like though that childcare, there's just
So
not
that's
enough.
what I was thinking
There's-
about, the flexibility.
Okay. I mean, I think there's not enough access to, there's a real issue with childcare and people being able to have like affordable childcare that even allows them
Transportation.
to do that.
I thought we were categorizing those issues as barriers.
They are under barriers right here. Let me just move it down a little bit.
Okay.
Okay. Okay.
It also is also included internet and
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
computers and skills and
Mm-hmm.
And parental care.
Mm-hmm.
One
Right.
other barrier is it's also highly competitive to get into some of these degree programs. Like, for example, nursing, you're competing, you might be working full time, for a particular hospital, but you're competing against a straight A student who's coming out of fill in the blank school. And there's only so many slots. It can be very challenging trying to make that transition.
Okay. Anything else? Okay, we can always come back to it. Okay, so these are just examples of the whys, and just kind of think about this. Is a very simple example. So you got caught speeding. Why? Because I was running late for work. Why? Because I got up late. Why? Because my alarm clock didn't work. Why? Because the batteries were flat. Why? Because I forgot to replace them. Why? So, well, that's the last why. So what that is saying to you is that you're getting a speeding ticket. There's no sense in you being mad when you get to work at your boss because you got a speed ticket. I've done that. Believe me, I've done it. You're already mad when you get to work, when the real root cause is because you forgot to replace the batteries in your alarm clock. So if you want to be mad at somebody, you get mad because you went to bed that night too tired and didn't feel like putting the batteries in your alarm clock. Does that make sense when you start looking at the whys and you get to the root cause? I wish it was that simple, but it's not. And I'm looking at your face, Carol, and you're like, wow. Okay. All right. So as we go through the 5 whys, we define the problem. We define why that problem is happening. Why is that? And we keep on asking until we can get to the bottom line, the root cause of why that problem has taken place. And that's how we come up with ways in which we can make change. Okay. Michael, is this? Okay, there you go, Michael.
Wrap up. What stood out to you during this session? That's a question. Question for the group. What stood out to you during this session? I will say there are a lot of whys. And I think some of them are self-inflicted and others are inflicted by outsiders, so to speak. Some things you don't have control over. But I like to deal with the things that you can have some type of control over.
Other thoughts on what stood out
So
in this session?
Gloria and Michael, do we feel as though we got to the root cause? That's kind of the goal for us to figure out what that root cause is, just based on the room that we're in and the space we're in. What do we view as the root cause? And to have a problem statement. So do you feel like we kind of got to that point?
So what we decided, was one of the biggest, the problem we decided was and this is the one that we elaborated on, was the lower education, the less knowledge of the skill sets that are needed. So that's what we decided was a big problem. So what we did is we got to the root cause by saying that, by identifying all of these whys right here. So the root cause at the very bottom, when you look at it, is maybe we don't know how to communicate with the target community or how to reach them, or and I think that that's probably the best place to stop with the root cause, because even aside from that bottom one there, if you look at it, we know that they have lower education. We know that there's less knowledge about the skill sets that are needed. But maybe the reason for that is that we, as a community of leaders and people that want to move and shake, don't know how to communicate with that particular community to reach them and teach them. Does that make sense, Lakeisha?
Right. I wonder if we can pull all of this together to make that problem statement. You know, we were saying the problem, I think you were reading, the problem statement is a one sentence statement that kind of captures everything from what we view as the root cause. So I wonder if we can maybe take some time to pull all of this together to finalize, maybe not finalize, but at least come up with an initial problem statement.
I think that needs some further clarification, because you're right. It should be a sentence as opposed to a paragraph.
Right. No. Right here, I said the bottom line, the last why was that the problem is that maybe we don't know how to communicate with the target community, how to reach them.
So you're saying that's the root cause?
Well, that's why I was asking, is there another cause other than the fact that it's lower education? The root cause is, well, the problem is that there's lower education in Blacks, less knowledge of the skill sets that are needed. That's the problem that we have identified. The root cause that we're saying of that problem, as we went through those whys, and you get down to the bottom one and you say, well, maybe we're not doing as good a job as we should be doing to help educate these people, help communicate with these people. I think that was a big thing that Darlinda talked about. So, you know, that's why I was asking, is this the real problem that we've identified? And we said that it was this lower education, this not lack of skill sets. We actually placed all of the responsibility on the person. That's why I was asking the group, do we need to relook at that and see if part of the responsibility lies somewhere else in the problem? You know what you see what I'm saying?
I do,
Because this
Gloria.
is what we said was
Yes.
the problem.
Mhm.
I think it's kind of hard in one evening to get to like, I think this is one area of a problem,
Right.
but it's so multifaceted. I don't feel like what we have here is truly representative of like the core problem.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a piece of it, but for me, I can only say it is
Mhm.
not like it is definitely not a full representation of the whole problem.
Right. I agree. I totally agree with you.
I agree as well.
And it's like you said, Sandra, you know, it may not be that we can pinpoint one particular thing that the problem. We need to focus on the things that we can make change, that we can make better. And I think one of the things that we can do in looking at this particular problem right here is that we can do a better job of communicating with the target market, the target community. Because if we can get to the target community and say, we're in East Winston, we're right here in the grinds with you. This is what you're going to have to do to improve your skill sets, to make yourself more marketable. Then we can take that, once we get that in these people, to these employers and say, why are you not hiring them? But until
And
we can
even-
get them up to that point, sorry.
Right. I like
ahead.
what you just said. This is what you have to do to make yourself more marketable. And then on the flip side of that, saying to the employers, this is what you have to do so that you
Right.
can have a workforce. Mhm.
But
Mhm.
see, the root causes, I think we have to start in the community. That's what we're saying as a group here. We got to get these people ready.
Mhm. Haven't
What do
we
you think?
done, I also want to just say, like, haven't we as a community, and haven't lots of communities done like a lot of work on marketing, talking to people, telling them about opportunities? Like, I hear this, and I'm not saying that this is not part of the issue, but for me, it feels like something that has been said for me that I've heard for a long time. And I'm not quite sure if it's like I'm not quite sure if it's the root cause.
And what are you saying that you're not quite sure?
Well, I mean, I think that I wouldn't hang my hat on if we just go
Right.
to the people and we have a conversation with them and talk to them about what's available, that's going to make a big difference, as if we haven't done a lot of that. I think that there's been lots of different programs that have tried to create,
I agree.
program, like it just doesn't feel, it feels like it's part of an issue, but it does not feel like it's a root,
Absolutely.
like it's
Well,
a root challenge. For
it's
me,
not the total right. I get it. So what do you think, in your expertise and in your travels, and like you said, you've seen it, we've all seen it, what do you think is a root cause of Blacks being under and unemployed and being in a position where they don't make the same salaries as their counterparts. What do you think is the root cause of that? Another
I
root
think
cause.
I just want to say that I think that there's like a number of different reasons why you have some people who are in certain positions, because everybody, we're not like a monolith, you know. So there's different reasons, but I do think that in
Right.
terms of underemployment, I think that it is almost too much to ask of a person who's already working 2 jobs and is underpaid and barely making ends meet. Go to Goodwill and enroll in this other training. Where do you even have the time? I just feel like there's a disconnect. There's a huge hurdle for people to get over. Everybody only has 24 hours in a day. I just feel like if I had a couple of kids and I was already working, you know, a full-time job, hardly making any money, I just feel like I'm too exhausted, honestly, to try to figure out how I'm going to wrap my head around and create the space to put my nose in books. And so I personally feel like we have to free up that person's ability to do that, whether that's subsidized so that they can work part-time. Like I'm willing to, I'm just saying, like, allow them to work part-time so that they can even have the capacity and the ability to spend time trying to train. I feel like it's a really heavy lift. That's all, for a large number of people.
The other thing we talked about was, the other thing that we talked about was fighting to get the minimum wage increased to $15. That was the other, we talked about that in our abstract. So that would help.
It does do some, and it's also
because
it also isn't enough to get them over the benefits cliff hurdle.
True.
But I'm not discounting the fact that people should make a higher living wage, even if it doesn't get them over it.
So what do you think that we could do as an organization to make that change, to make that happen, help make that happen? Because right now, the barrier that we're saying is, is it wages? Is it volume overload for people? Or what is the problem here?
I mean, I think for me, part of the solution that I would love to test somewhere is subsidizing individuals so that they do not have to work full time while they're also trying to pursue degrees and trying to figure out how they're going to, put food on the table. It's just, I think that it's a lot to ask of people who are already probably working 2 jobs.
So what can we do?
I'm jumping to the solution, which is probably where we're not. I think that between employers, I think that there can be innovative solutions that can come up that can help people in order to, there can be job sharing so that you can work part-time and not full-time. And there can be other dollars that come alongside of that to make sure that your basic needs are met.
Absolutely.
If you're in a program, I can pay for your childcare so that you don't have to worry about the fact that you're not getting X, Y, and Z. There are things that we can do to subsidize so that a mother or a father can sit there and have 3 hours every evening to study and do the work that they truly need to do. Pay their bills, pay their rent for the year. That's not unheard of.
Is that something that we could take to employers as a recommendation? Because that's who's going to have to make the decision to incorporate such programs and such flexible hours and flexibility within the workforce. And that seems to be a huge issue, especially in the Black communities. So is that something that we as a work group can look at later on?
I think if there's a program that the employer is already, like if there's a pathway and a track that an employer is trying to get more of their individuals to walk through that door so that they can fill this need because they need X, Y, and Z level employees, but they only have, you know, people who don't have the skill sets yet. I think that there's a way to come together with private and public funding to cover some of those costs so that they can figure out like, oh, how to do something more flexible. I think there's opportunities to do something personally, but I don't know what other people think.
Okay, so for the purpose of this, of tonight, and those are all great points. I tried to put most of them down. For the purpose of tonight, for a problem statement, we're still kind of back at where we were. Like I said, personally, I think there's two problems here. One lies in the responsibility of the employee candidate. The other lies in the responsibility of the employer. So, but right now we pretty much identified a problem here. The biggest problem here is what we're saying is that there's lower education and less knowledge of the needed skill sets in Black. Are we saying Black? I'm saying the Black community. We don't work like. Is that a fair statement? We got about 3 or 4 minutes. What does everybody think?
Well, you know, when you talk about problem statement, once again, my understanding that's supposed to be one sentence or whatever. To me, one problem is the income insufficiency for the Black community. That's the problem. Income insufficiency. That's the problem, I think. Now, there are different ways to address that insufficiency, but that is the problem. We don't make enough money. Because as you and I know, that the more money you make, frankly, it solves a lot of other problems that you might have. You live in a better neighborhood. You know, you go to better schools. You're probably in less of a crime-ridden kind of area. All those things are somewhat solved. You eat better if you make more money. I mean, that's the reality of it.
So would you say that, does that make sense what you see on the board, or do we need other reasons for the income insufficiency? Because these are the ones that we've identified. But again, I say that we don't need to put all the responsibility on the individual. I think some of it should be relative to the employer. But this is what we identified as a problem. What does everybody think?
Well, I don't want to speak for the employer, but if you haven't gotten the skill set and the education that's required, how is it now on me?
But what if you are in a position and you have that skill set? Income insufficiency could also include, I'm working the same job as my white counterpart, and I have, I'm passed over for a promotion that I know that I'm more qualified for, that kind of thing. Because, like we were talking about, sure, many Blacks are in positions within these major organizations, but are they advancing? So, it's not just the people that are sitting on the couch, but it's the people who are out here making $9 an hour when they're being passed over for positions that they qualify as an hour.
I think that you're right. I think employers do have there's ownership for employers, and I think that they need to create really strong pipeline programs
Right.
that allow people to actually increase their wages and become, have advancement within their companies. So they have to be very intentional in creating programs and
hold on, I want to
programs
write that down,
actually attract.
Sandra.
Okay.
Sandra,
Yeah.
please tell me one of the whys, and I think that will cover our whys. What did you say about that?
I had said that employers need to create pathways to advancement within their companies, and make sure that
that there's an equitable opportunity to apply, to advance.
Yeah, right, and that the opportunities are equitable for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that and it's not to say that none of this exists, but obviously, even though we have apprenticeship programs, either we're not being accepted to them, they're overlooking, Black individuals who could be going into those positions, or there's a disconnect.
Mm-hmm. I think that's perfect. That last statement, employers need to create one of the whys is that we would say employers need to create pathways to advancement within their companies and ensure that the opportunities are equitable for everyone. And that goes back to the concept of having checks and balances, having people like us to go in and challenge their HR practices. You know what I'm saying? To challenge that they have a diverse and inclusion program so that their positions are equitable to everyone to apply. That's kind of where I was going with that. But yeah, I mean, I think that will help them hold some of the responsibility. What do you all think? I guess that could be, I guess if you look at it, once people are educated, once people have the necessary skills, then are we saying that's going to get them the job that they want, that they deserve? Is that all it's going to take? Is there not any issues associated with penetrating through the system? I'm asking.
And once again, are we coming up with solutions now?
No, asking. I was just asking. Because I guess I'm trying to see, does this cover everything that we're saying that we can create a problem statement?
I think it does.
Are those the elements? Okay. Is everybody comfortable? Those elements? Sandra, Darlinda, any questions? Lakeisha?
I think we've gotten a lot of great whys. I don't know for any close
Okay.
solutions.
Okay, well, we can come, we'll get there at the next, okay. Ready? And you'll be able to take from our PowerPoint the note or problem statement. So Michael, you ready for the wrap up right quick? You on mute? You on mute?
Okay.
You on mute? Okay.
The wrap up is let's head back to the main room. Unless
Okay.
somebody has something else they'd like to say.
Mm-hmm.
All right.